Hi, I'm Andrea Johnston, entrepreneur, communications leader, and a believer in the power of women and the unlimited potential in all of us. On Women I Want You to Know, we shine a light on real women who are breaking barriers, blazing new trails, and redefining what leadership looks like. These are real conversations about ambition, drive, difficult choices, and impact. The kind you won't hear anywhere else. Because every woman's story has the power to propel another from dream to reality. This is Women I Want You to Know. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Women I Want You to Know. I am so excited today that we have with us Abenaa Hayes, a very old colleague of mine from my real chemistry days, and a woman I had the incredible opportunity to work with in biotech communications and whose career has continued to evolve and is now a very successful founder and entrepreneur herself. She's a communications and brand marketing guru. She is a thought leader with expertise in healthcare, biotech, social impact, and inclusion. And for over 20 years, Abenaa has helped startups, social enterprises, high growth and leading Fortune 500 companies reach stakeholders, influencers, and communities through transformative narratives, dynamic storytelling, and meaningful engagement. Her professional mission is to guide leaders and brands who want to meet the 21st century societal mandates head on. I've seen her do this firsthand, and she's amazing. And in addition to being an entrepreneur, building within organizations, as well as being an entrepreneur, she has deep experience from some of the top agencies like Edelman, as well as Real Chemistry, and now with her own consulting firm, Elysee Consulting. So, Abenaa, so happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Same here. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, Andrea.
I know. I wish we were kind of back in New York together in one
I
place,
know.
but we'll have to make the electronic platform work for us.
Oh, we will.
Um,
We will. This is going to be good.
It's exciting to see that we are both back in the entrepreneurial chair in control of our own destiny. And I would love to hear more about your journey to get here, because when we were last together, we were working in sort of a larger, much larger global agency environment. So tell me about it.
So, yeah. It's funny because now that I am in the entrepreneurial era of my life, my brother and my friends have said to me, they were like, you should have done this all along. So, I kind of grew up, as you know, in the agency land across a range of different companies and always believed that I needed to get my grounding, my footing, if you will, with some of those kind of big names behind me because when you're trying to establish yourself, particularly as someone who's lived in different countries, I've now lived in the US for 30 years, having those kind of creds, if you will, were kind of entryways for me to doing really meaningful work. But I always had that entrepreneurial spirit in me. I kind of saw it with my mother, who was a lawyer, a judge. She had a bed and breakfast on the side and also fashioned herself a designer.
I had
So
no idea. Wow. What an
she was
incredible background.
she was doing all the things. So, and I'm always someone who people call perpetual motion. I'm always about doing something or wanting to think about what's next. So, I kind of fell into actually being an entrepreneur because, as you know, I was building within Real Chemistry, a practice really focused on inclusion and engagement through a range of different cultural lenses. And then I just had this moment where I was like, you know what? If I can build this for someone else, I think I can build it on my own. And I literally took the leap of faith without, calling people like you before I did it. I think I called you afterwards and figured out that I would just do it as I was going along, which I've been doing now for almost 4 years.
That's amazing. And 4 years is no small victory. I mean, so many startups fail in year one. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with sort of the instability and the inconsistency that often overshadows the early years. So 4 years is a huge accomplishment. Congratulations. And you talked about your mother, and I believe that that family history also had a lot to do with the identity for your agency and how you refer to your company. Tell us a little bit more about the background there.
Sure thing. So, my mother was a Francophile, so she loved all things French. So, growing up, my mother was known to be making baguettes and croissants and playing Edith Piaf, and my brother and I were like, what is happening here? But she also loved entertaining. So she decided to convert the building that was next to ours, the house we grew up in, into a bed and breakfast, which was like a precursor to Airbnb. And she named it Suites Elysee, not only because she loved all things French, but the neighborhood that we grew up in Trinidad used to be called the Champs-Élysées, like the name Big Boulevard in Paris, because it was owned by a French person back in the 1800s. So when you actually look at the map of that neighborhood, it says Champs-Élysées, and it was a big estate that was then converted into this residential neighborhood. So it was kind of honoring and recognizing the origins, if you will, of that neighborhood, and then also her love of all things French. And the thing that's interesting about this French person who owned that land, he was actually one of the first people in the country to actually have an interracial marriage that like defied societal expectations at the time. So there were so many things about the story about this person, about the neighborhood. So it's, a nod to my mother's side hustle being the hostess with the mostest of the Airbnb and also the neighborhood that I grew up in.
I love that, and that's actually one of the things I really often admired about you and love about you is the way you've embraced all the different elements of your background and really incorporated into not only your identity, but how you counsel clients and how you look at the world and the different types of lenses that you can see through. Can you talk a little bit more about your background and growing up in Trinidad?
So I like to say, like, I have like inclusion and culture all in my DNA because I was born in Canada, raised in Trinidad, and have lived in the US now for 31 years. Trinidad and Tobago is a very interesting country because it was colonized by very many European countries. And by extension of that, it has all of these different cultures. So it was a Spanish colony, it was an English colony. You then had people of African descent who came in through slavery. You had people of East Indian or what Americans call South Asian descent come through indentured servitude. You had people who were Chinese, Lebanese, Syrian come in for a whole range of different reasons. So if you want to actually see a country that is a true melting pot in action, Trinidad is it. So I kind of grew up in a place where I saw all of these different cultures, these different practices, these different ways of being just through everyday life. There's a lot of that kind of broader lens that I bring to the work that I do. And I would also say just in terms of my family, it's interesting that if you look at it generationally, there were a lot of female entrepreneurs who probably weren't calling themselves that, right? So my great great aunt, who was the person who purchased the house that became my childhood home, did so in 1920 when it was unusual for women to be owning property, right? My paternal grandmother was a musician and an ethnomusicologist who literally revived all the folk music in the Caribbean and created a music group and recorded things. And she was the first female senator in Trinidad and Tobago when we became an independent country. And then my mother was one of the first women appointed a judge in Trinidad at 33 years old. So I kind of grew up like this whole idea of seeing is believing because you kind of saw what that looked like in action without having to like think about it. And then my father was a kidney specialist and an immunologist who wanted to give back to his community. So he actually created a foundation before he died that gave free dialysis care for people who have kidney disease. And this foundation is still operational 40 plus years into its existence now. So I saw a whole lot of things around community service, like community and cultural engagement, and just seeing what's actually possible just as I was growing up.
Yeah, I think what you talked about too with regard to your aunt and your mother is representation, right? And I think that is so important. It's one of the things that I try to do through our Women I Want You to Know program and through this podcast is to demonstrate representation, women leading in so many different areas, because I feel like that's what other women need to see in order to feel like, oh, I could do that or I can take that risk, right? I think that representation just it matters so much more than we even realize. And hearing you talk about that in the context of growing up, that really resonates with me. So, I mean, given, where you've been, the journey you had through, agencies and then deciding now to take the plunge and be an entrepreneur and here you are 4 years later, what would you say are some of your biggest lessons learned or words of wisdom that you would have for others thinking about this track?
So I would say one of the biggest things for me has been literally going through the great unlearn, because the way you operate as an entrepreneur is dramatically different from how you operate within companies, particularly when you come from the agency universe that we both came up in, which is very client service oriented. So the way you like market yourself or kind of sell what your services are is a little different from what you need to do as an entrepreneur. So there was a lot that I learned within agency world that I had to unlearn as an entrepreneur. For example, when you do business development, right? The sales cycle in an agency is so much longer and it's all about how much value you bring along, right? And there's a lot of breadcrumbing that goes on to actually get to signing a client. Time is money when you're an entrepreneur. You don't have the benefit of all that time. So I've had to kind of like adjust how I manage like not only like soliciting clients, but also getting to a contract or a scope because time is money. And so there's ways that you gotta figure out how you, like, get them to close or how you, like, find, like, compromises so at least you get stuff that you get paid for while they're trying to figure out other things. I would also say, and it's also a piece of advice, you have to embrace all the messiness with some of this. Like, I am very much a type A person in a lot of ways, and I've had to just kind of just go with the flow very often with a lot because sometimes that's just what you have to do, and you have to just be comfortable with just actually moving forward with things versus trying to make it perfect.
Oh, yeah. You can't
Yeah.
let the good get in the way, yeah, the perfect get in the way of the good because
A
sometimes
hu
you just gotta roll.
100%, you just gotta roll, right? So and I think being able to just, like, go with it and rolling with it, I think also then helps your, like, confidence muscle even more than you may have already had because 'cause you're taking the biggest bet, and that bet is on yourself.
Especially in an agency setting, I feel like a lot of the time we are making money for other people and we're doing the work, we're developing the business, we're focusing on client relationships. But then when we get to go out and do it on our own, that hustle is even more meaningful, right? Because it's fulfilling, you're choosing who you work with, you're focused on building that business, you're focused on who you engage as either collaborators or partners or employees. And it's just a whole different mindset. And I think your point about pace is so important, and sometimes I even forget that because, building Pure, it was also a different time, right? Digital and social media wasn't a thing. So when I started my first journey in entrepreneurship, things were a little bit different, I feel like, than they are today, and that pace is even more rapid because everything with email, Zoom, things just get accelerated. You're not waiting for a meeting, you're not waiting for this. Things just the pace of business is so fast, and we now have technology as entrepreneurs at our fingertips that allow us to, in some ways, compete with larger entities, but also be even more nimble and accelerated.
Yep, 100%. I mean, it's like there's an expression we use in Trinidad to talk about acceleration is like you move at pace, and that's literally how the world is working, and you gotta be able to go with it.
No, I think that's really well said. I couldn't agree
Yeah.
more, and I think sometimes it can be, like, overwhelming
Yeah,
to an entrepreneur because not only are you moving at pace, but you're oftentimes wearing so many different hats that
mhm,
it's sort of the, chief cook and bottle washer kind of mentality.
100%. That was one of my mother's favorite expressions, by the way.
I love her. It's also one of mine because
Yeah,
honestly, I think it best describes what it's like when you are trying to manage multitudes of things,
yeah,
many of which are not directly interrelated, but they're all relevant to getting the ultimate work product out the door and running a successful business.
yeah, 100%,
What do you
100%.
think was your biggest misconception about what this would be like?
I would say, and I think this is just a function of the environment that we're in, I thought that it would probably be easier to strike a balance between doing the work and doing business development. Because to your point about having to be the chief cook and bottle washer, I feel like comms people, which as a friend of mine says, literally have to fill in all the gaps. Like you literally are a Swiss Army knife. So because you're doing that, you could oftentimes, as the young people say, get really locked in to the work you're doing for a client. But you gotta be able to be locked in and also, like, track all the other potential, like, inbounds and clients that you have in a pipeline, and I think being able to strike that balance was probably a little trickier than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I think a lot of people talk about that in the context of scaling, but in my mind, it's just also table stakes of learning how to start something from ground zero because you don't have the luxury early on of being able to delegate things or necessarily hire or outsource. So you have to find a way to sort of make it all happen. And I think that that idea of, like, scheduling and being able to kind of block time wherever possible on your calendar for admin or ops is fundamental and should be kind of like a no-brainer, but it's one of the hardest things I think to do, especially when you're trying to build business.
Yeah, 100%, 100%, which is why all the lovely AI tools we have can be super supportive and actually just managing life as an entrepreneur.
So tell me about AI and how it is playing a role in your business today or in your life. Where are you seeing the greatest value? And also, if you have any thoughts about how AI is going to impact communicators moving forward.
So to me, AI literally like to riff on the Microsoft product is like your co-pilot. I do think it's totally clutch and critical in terms of how you drive efficiencies and how you work. From the simple things like scheduling, call transcripts, being able to kind of serve as a thought partner as you're ideating on content. It's been super helpful with me in terms of those types of tasks. I've even used it to help create slides because I will tell you, for as much as a lot of my friends in my Edelman days called me the PowerPoint whisperer, I hate developing PowerPoints. So I actually work with Gamma to help me create and design slide decks so that I don't have to spend too much time kind of futzing with format, layout, imagery. It helps me a lot in that regard.
Are you happy with the quality of that? Are you finding it not only easy, but the quality is where you want it to
The
be?
quality is pretty decent, I'll say. I was quite pleasantly surprised. I had to create a deck for a client a year ago for some speaker training, and it not only helped me with the visuals, but it also added more content that was helpful in terms of contextualizing the activation and what they needed to consider. So I was like, it was the best helper ever.
I love that, and I think these tools are, like, they're so rapidly evolving too. It's like they keep getting better.
I know. That's why, like, the one tool that I love that I don't, it like freaks me out every time I use it. I use this function of it, Notebook LM, which is the Google AI platform that's like a closed platform. So it doesn't save your content in memory. So if you're working off of very confidential documents, you could use it. So you can upload things and it'll give you the summaries and so on. But it can also generate a podcast and gives you an episode about what your content says, what some key questions are. It's like so wild when it generates it.
So can you repeat the name of it again? What is it?
It's called Notebook LM. It's from Google.
Okay,
Yeah.
Notebook LM
Yeah.
from Google. I'm gonna check that one
You
out.
should totally check it out. So I say, so in saying all of this, I would say in terms of what AI means for communicators, I firmly believe that it's the co-pilot and partner to the work that we do because it helps with efficiency, but it will never ever help with things that are truly human. So like really truly perfecting someone's voice, making someone make it sound like it was written by a human, but also it can't reason or give judgment the way humans can. So for me, like humans will always be at the center and you will always need to rely on what some people call human intelligence because humans will never be able to replace technology. And I don't think the technology will ever get to that point. We'll still need to be in the center.
I totally agree. I just think at the end of the day too, it just puts more emphasis on strategy and having the experience to say, "This is relevant, this is not," or, "Oh, I like what I'm seeing here, let's explore this further." And to me, that's the incredible power of AI is it learns rapidly, so as long as an experienced strategist is utilizing the tool, it will get great output, but on its own, it needs that sort of direction and it needs that prompting, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it could only deliver for you based on what you give it. It's like that quintessential garbage in, garbage out. So if you don't prompt it the right way, you definitely won't get what you need, which is why the strategy piece is so key.
Are there any other tools, even from, like, a lifestyle perspective where you're like, "Oh, this has been game changing for me?"
I just started doing this because a friend of mine recommended it, but using ChatGPT to help me figure out what my wardrobe options could be for different events.
I know, I have friends that are doing that too. How is that going?
It's not too bad actually. I was pleasantly surprised because I mean I know I use it for many other things, but I was like to really truly like wardrobe? Okay, I didn't know that. Also using it to kind of track different like wellness routines. So for example, I just started going back to the gym regularly and working with a personal trainer. So I sometimes upload the routines that she creates for me and ask ChatGPT to help me figure out what else I might need to adjust or amend. or, what I might need to think about differently.
I've had to do meal planning for me, like, when I'm trying to really lock it in on my, nutrition. I love giving, saying, "Here's what I want, like, high protein, whatever, lean, and I'd like to stay within these calories," and it does an amazing job of putting together meals and then the shopping list. So, I love things like that because those are things that I could otherwise spend hours in a rabbit hole of research and looking at reels, and so it really makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, although you don't mind looking at the reels, but yes.
Yes, but it can be like a giant time sink is the
Yeah.
the challenge. So, I have another question for you, sort of going back to the world that we're in today and sort of how things have evolved, because you mentioned that, and I think, I just feel like communicators are under a ton of pressure right now because, first of all, there's just so many forces externally that we are having to react to as both business owners and communicators, but also I think as strategists. And then I think there's as women, I think, particular concerns, sensitivities, awareness that I don't think we've seen in a while, and part of that is just sort of changes that are happening in the broader landscape globally, as well as very much here in the US, and I know I see it and I feel it in the employee groups of the companies I consult to because there's just this heavy level of distraction, but also of constant tension and anxiety. What are you seeing?
I'm seeing all of those things, but one of the things that I think has been the most challenging for a lot of the leaders I work with is how to actually lead and communicate through chaos. Because we literally are operating in multiple chaos cycles. And like you said, like they're like distractions, but they keep coming at us, right? In so many different ways and from so many different angles. And one of the key things that I have leaned into, and I've actually done some workshops on this, is leveraging the power of the pause to actually get to the clarity. Because I think very often the default is to kind of run into the fire, literally, to be able to show up, demonstrate you have answers, or at least like take a stand in some which way, shape, or form. And for as much as that may seem to be like the right gut instinct, that could actually have all manner of negative effects. So I've really just been focus on generating clarity through pausing and assessing because one, it gives everybody a moment to just like take a breath, but also it gives you that benefit of the time that you need to figure out what your path forward is. And it's actually, I heard Brene Brown talk about this a little bit ago at a summit I attended. She was like, the greatest resource that we need to leverage is time. And very often we don't have it. So you've got to find the ways to be intentional about carving it out and using it to map what your path forward is.
Yeah, I think that that is probably our greatest challenge in this world and this digital environment is feeling like we can create that time and space because things move so quickly. But you're so right, because all too often, if we immediately react, it's from an emotional and not logical place. And it only can compound the issues and challenges. I think, the power of the pause, the power of reflection is so important before we kinda jump all in. And also things are like, a hot mess in 1 minute, and then the next minute, it's like, "Okay, that issue's now gone, and it's something else." So, you
I
know
know it's like you're literally fighting fires everywhere,
Yes.
everywhere.
I feel it's like whack-a-mole every day. It's like
Yes, yes, and that is yeah, I've used that phrase because 'cause you're literally like whack-a-mole, and I think it's like, you've gotta have that reflection time, but the other piece is really making sure that you create space for conversation. So it's a time to reflect, but a space for conversation because there's so much that comes out of that, that could help ground you, but also steer you.
No, I think that's very true, and I think as an advisor to companies as you are, that type of insight and that type of counsel is so important because everyone is so in their own echo chamber and bubble that having that outside perspective really has an impact on how they approach any given situation or challenge. So, I think that just speaks to why it's so important to have communications advisors, especially when we're navigating the type of landscape we currently are. What do you think it means for women? What are you seeing in terms of, like, I know you're so great out there with speaking and going to conferences, and, a lot of that isn't specific to women, but I think women, I'm seeing so much desire to connect and to network in a way that is perhaps more organized and more intentional than I've seen it before. What are you feeling on that front?
I would definitely agree with that and kind of check to that because one, not only is I mean, networking has always been important for us because it's the key to getting those like entry points into different opportunities and also getting the advice that you need. I just think kind of also given the larger environment, it's also just giving women the opportunity to really be in community in a meaningful way. I was at actually a conference for the women's group chief in DC, and I walked out of there feeling like I had just gotten, like, a warm hug. Not only did everyone come together to kind of learn and listen to the speakers, but they also just really wanted to be together, and hear from each other, learn about each other, and then also figure out how else they could be supporting one another. And I feel I've seen that trend become even more pronounced throughout this year because I think in the face of everything that's coming at us, you need your people. And you need people across, like, identity, experiences, and cultures because together, we're better off than if we're trying to go alone. There's that African proverb I think that you probably heard, like, "If you wanna go far, go alone. If you wanna go, like, further, like, you bring bigger people together." I think I'm seeing more of that, and it's a lot more palpable.
Yeah, and I mean, I just kind of go back to even some of our old hashtags, right? Better together. I think
Yes.
that that's very true.
Yeah,
And especially as communicators, the benefit we get of the diversity of thought and the
yeah,
diversity of lived experience
yeah,
really makes for a more powerful outcome and brings
mhm,
everyone forward. And again, sometimes we're not even aware of our own blinders. So that's incredibly valuable.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
When you look at 2026, what are you most excited for, optimistic about?
I am most excited to see the direction in which the communications kind of field goes because I think for a very long time, and I'm not sure if you can relate to this, for as much as we know what we do and what we deliver for clients, very often we're the ones who are not always having seats at the table. And there's a whole conversation about how communicators need to get seats at the table. But given the world that we're in, and the stakes that people are navigating, I think that there's been a recognition of not only the value of communicators, but you need to be able to use them in different ways. So it's like literally, you need the person who wears multiple hats, who could do all of the things. So when I think of that, I actually think there's huge opportunity for consultants and fractional comms advisors because we could show up in a multitude of ways in a cost efficient manner for a lot of companies. And this is not to knock the agency world because there's value to that. But I think just knowing the high stakes world that we're in, I think there's going to be huge value in people who can kind of serve as single operators and really truly be embeds in companies.
Right, and I think the nimbleness and the sort of flexibility that comes with that is something that companies are valuing more and more, and I'm so glad you brought up fractional because this was actually a topic of conversation in a meeting I had last week with a couple of folks that I work with at Entreprenista. We were talking about how I think a lot of businesses are having to evolve the model a little bit because more and more clients are looking for people with your level of expertise, with real strategic insights, who can come in and lead because they can't either afford or they're not willing to yet invest in that role full time. And I think in some ways, like it's a phenomenal trend that could continue well beyond, the current environment because the benefit of having someone who isn't just limited to your company, who can come and play that senior role and really help drive actual strategy and activity within the organization as opposed to just being the outside agency. I think it's a really cool value proposition. And I think it puts you in a position to have even more impact and influence. Is that what you're feeling?
Not only is that not what I'm feeling, but I think that kind of fractional opportunity gives you like place and space to work across a range of different like entities and that like delivers huge value for everyone that you work with, right? And I mean, like I've worked with like social impact organizations and then I've worked with like some startups and you'd be surprised the like cross pollination of insights that come out of those engagements and everybody gets value out of it, which I absolutely love. It allows people like me to kind of flex different muscles, but it allows like the company to truly lean into like literally, it's almost like a Pandora's box of lovely opportunities that they could kind of like tap into with a range of superpowers.
I like that, the Pandora's box of superpowers. That's very compelling.
Hey,
And I also love the idea of flexing between different types of businesses because
yeah,
I also feel like for us as advisors, we learn so much and we continue to grow because we're seeing how this is playing out in the nonprofit world or how this is playing out in the for profit world or the agency world. And so it allows us to bring a lot more creativity and I think a lot of innovative perspective because one size does not fit all.
yeah, 100%. And I mean, and I think that perspective, to your point about diverse perspectives, is what people really, really need in today's world. So I think being able to deliver on that is so important.
Well, one of the other things that I'm kind of jealous of is that, you do live in this really cool city and one of the hipper areas of the city. So, I can't have this conversation with you and not ask, like, what's hot in New York? What's trending in Brooklyn? Like, where should people be enjoying some nights on the town or a good dinner? I love following you on Instagram and seeing all the cool places you're going. So you have to fill me in.
So, I mean, like New York has always had a vibrant food scene and it's always evolving, always changing. And there's a restaurant it's probably closer to Fort Greene than downtown Brooklyn called Theodora that a friend of mine introduced me to. And I think I've been there 4 times. And we've gotten to know the maitre d'. So we kind of just like when we go have dinner, we make a reservation for the next one.
That's a great sign that it's an amazing place.
It's, like, amazing. It's Mediterranean food, excellent service, a really great menu in, like, a really cool kind of neighborhood in Brooklyn. The other place that don't laugh at me, I've only ordered takeout because I have yet to get a reservation, but it is good. It's called Masawala& and Sons. It's an Indian restaurant in Park Slope.
Ooh.
Amazing. Really, truly, like, quintessential Indian dishes for me with the right level of spice because you have to have the spice.
Vindaloo, I love me some vindaloo, so I
It's
like the
so good.
spice, yeah.
And then the other one is called Tatiana by Chef Kwame. It's in Lincoln Center.
Kwame, he was in Top Chef, right?
He was on Top
Yeah.
Chef, yeah. So he makes these curry goat patties that are to die for, and an oxtail dish that will send you to food heaven.
It sounds so exotic, I love it. I'm gonna have to check that one out too. I knew you would be a good source of inspo, just from the photos I've seen, I'm like, "Oh, she's gonna have some
It's
great
so good.
recommendations."
So good. Highly
I
recommend
love
those 3.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and I know our listeners will very much appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, you could, like, hit me up and ask me what else is coming because 'cause I'm always stumbling upon things, so more than happy to share.
What's the best way for people to connect with you? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Instagram? Like, how do you prefer people connect with you?
I think it's a combination for me of LinkedIn and Instagram, so I'm on both with my business handles, and I try to be good with tracking my DM, so yeah, totally hit me up on LinkedIn or Instagram and happy to connect.
Excellent. I love that because, not only with the great food recommendations, and I love seeing all the conference updates and the insights you post. I really like the way you break down some of the takeaways from the different events you've been to. So please keep sharing that. It's very valuable to all of us. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to leave listeners with? Any other perspective for maybe young women who are early in their career or honestly, I think you and I both know a lot of people that have been going through layoffs and experiencing some of the downsizing. So, any kind of parting words of advice?
I think I always just tell folks just keep the faith and faith in yourself because that's the thing that's gonna kind of power you through. And also find ways to build like a squad or a community around you who could help provide support. I think Andrea, you could probably relate to this as well. When you're trying to either find a new job or build something on your own, it could feel really lonely. So knowing that you have people around you to help, I think is so important. That's why I know I go to all the things and I look like the joiner on LinkedIn, but when I became an entrepreneur, finding those communities of people who could serve as like thought partners and sense checks were so critical to me.
Couldn't agree more how critical it is. And I think you also raise a really good point, which is, the reality is all these social media platforms only tell part of the story. And a big part of going to these conferences, a big part of being part of these networks and attending different events is part of building your relationships and your network and staying visible. And sometimes I think there's this reticence to sort of engage in person. And part of that is I think post-COVID, people are still getting used to coming away from technology as our sole focus. But at least for me, nothing replaces those in-person moments and hearing someone speak in person and being able to follow up with Q&A or connecting with the person seated next to you who you otherwise never would have met. I think there's so much value there, so I'm really glad that you said that because I think, what people see on social media only tells part of the story, and the other part is all the benefit you get by being there in person.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the number of times that I have gone to places that are like, "I've seen you, but now I feel I know you." There's something so very, like, human in terms of those IRL connections. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, and I love it, the IRL. We are doing our Women I Want You to Know series. We're taking it also into dinners, and that's been our whole thing is Women I Want You to Know IRL because, it's awesome to be able to shine a light on people like yourself on LinkedIn as we did earlier this year, and now to do this through a podcast. But I think even bringing people together around a table and having the opportunity to share insights and stories, and also you can be vulnerable in person in a way that you can never be, I think, electronically, and there's just something about being able to look someone in the eye and relate to something and support them in that moment that is so special and really kind of adds to the relationship, to the authenticity, to sort of all of those things.
Check to all of yeah, 100%, yeah. And I think in 2026, you're gonna see a lot more of the IRL connections for sure.
I think you're right, and you know what? All the data that I've seen from all these event planning firms and everything, they're all talking about this huge push to get back in person, and I guess the 2025 data far exceeded what even people expected, so I think
Yeah,
that just speaks to how much people are craving that in-person connectivity.
yeah, yeah,
Well, I hope that
agree.
2026 gives us a chance to connect again in person.
I
We'll
know,
definitely be doing a dinner in New York, so I'll hope to see you around that table. It'll be a
for
lot of
sure.
fun.
Yeah, we'll make it happen.
Definitely. Well, I can't thank you enough for being here today. What is your website address so everyone has it?
It is www.elyseeconsulting.co.
Excellent. We will put that in the notes as well, along
Thank
with your
you.
LinkedIn and your Instagram handle.
Yep.
And I'm just really appreciative that you were here to share your story and tell us more about your journey to entrepreneurship and also share a little bit of that insight into all things New York and Brooklyn. So thank you.
Thank you. This was so much fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here today and sharing in this inspiring story from Women I Want You to Know. Please leave a review and share this episode with another woman in your life. And join the conversation and connect with us on LinkedIn and Instagram and keep fueling the future for female founders and leaders. Thank you.